Six Nations penultimate game. Ireland chasing down confirmation of that Six Nations title. Scotland chasing a triple crown. We will go through some lineups, some stats, recent history, and predictions for this clash between number 1 in the Six Nations, number 2 in the world, Ireland, up against number 3 in the Six Nations, number 6 in the world, Scotland. Both sides, I feel like, are going to be fired up for this one because they'll both not be entirely happy with what happened last week. The Irish, though, Andy Farrell has done what Andy Farrell does when his team loses, which is not that often. I remember he did the same thing after copping a pretty big scoreline against the All Blacks not that long ago. He keeps faith with his guys. He's not one to make a knee-jerk reaction, and he mentioned in the pre-match press conference that disappointed players often kind of want to bounce back with something better, and he is showing absolute faith. Now, we all remember what happened in that second game in that tour of New Zealand, so he'll be looking for a kind of similar reaction here. The starting 15 is unchanged. Porter, Sheehan, and Furlong. That's the same front row. Porter's penalty count here, I think he's still the highest in the Six Nations, but largely that's attributed to the first couple of rounds. I think he didn't concede any penalties against England last week. He's still a big threat at the breakdown, still big at scrum time. McCarthy and Byrne continue on the second row. Omani, Van der Flier, and Doris in the back row. Doris continues to be Ireland's top tackler. He is also Ireland's top guy for carries. He is an absolute workhorse of a player. Gibson-Park, who's had 3 try assists, and Jack Crowley continue on at 9 and 10. Midfield is still Aki and Henshaw, but we do see Ringrose on the bench for this one, which is a bit of a welcome addition to the squad. And then James Lowe, Calvin Nash, and Hugo Keenan round out the back 3. James Lowe, 4 tries. The top guy for Irish run meters, the top guy, I think he might be the top guy in the Six Nations run meters, actually. Top guy for offloads for Ireland. Very, very busy. One of the biggest boots in the game. He's been kicking a lot of ball, certainly more than any other left winger in this competition. Calvin Nash's inclusion is one that raised a few eyebrows, seeing as took a big collision last week, but he was on a 7-day return to play protocol, and apparently Andy Farrell says he passed all his tests with flying colours, so not a shadow of a doubt that he passed all his tests. So that is welcome news. There's no Kieran Frawley for this one, though, because he is on a 12-day return to play protocol, so he was never going to be eligible for this one. So the only changes for Ireland come on the bench. Kelleher, Healy, and Bealham, they retain their spots. Ryan Baird is going to cover maybe purely more lock this time. And Jack Conan is the other forward replacement because we've got 3 backs this time instead of the 6-2 split, with Conor Murray, Harry Byrne, and Garry Ringrose being the 3 backs. Kind of like my Blues in Super Rugby last week, the 6-2 split didn't work that well for Ireland last week. When that's what happens when you get early injuries to the backs. The 6-2 split, the 7-1 split, whichever one you want to go, when you sacrifice backs for forwards, it is a gamble. If it pays off, you may get a bit of extra grunt in the pack for the latter stages of the game. But if you get injuries to the backs early, it means you're playing with a disjointed backline for a large period. As I said, watched a lot of rugby games last week. 2 teams, my Blues and Ireland, both had 6-2 splits, and it both didn't work out that well. It ended up with half-backs or scrum halves playing in kind of unfamiliar positions. But yeah, the starting 15 for Ireland, really stable. And I love the fact that Andy Farrell does that. He's not a guy who feels the need to just make wholesale changes. It's not really his thing. Scotland have made a few changes, but more tinkering more than anything. Pierce Schoolman, George Turner, Xander Fagerson, that's the kind of same front row, which is pleasing. Grant Gilchrist and Scott Cummings continue on the second row, so it's unchanged type 5. And then Andy Christie, Rory Darge, Jack Dempsey, unchanged back row. Jack Dempsey, top ball carrier for the Scots. Rory Darge, he's going to be a threat at the breakdown. Andy Christie was pretty dynamic. He gave away a couple of penalties last week, but also got big line breaks and turnovers, was literally involved in a bit of everything. So, I mean, you feel like scrum time is just going to be the one area these guys are certainly going to need to be solid. Ben White also returns. Gregor Townsend mentioned that he was basically on a recharge week last week. He had mentioned in last week's pre-match press conference that he'd played a lot of rugby. So he had a week off last week. So hopefully he should be fit and raring to go. Finn Russell continues on number 10. He's co-captain. He's had the most kicks from hand by a mile for any player of the Six Nations. I think he's had 70. I forget how many it is per game. But yeah, the next best guy is in the 40s or 30s for kicks from hand. So Finn Russell putting a lot of boot to ball, but it's not always just kicking long. We didn't see him take the ball to the line that much last week, but yeah, he's got a bit of variety in his game, which is pleasing for those of us who like watching him play, and not everyone is a fan. Stafford McDowell's inclusion in the number 12 jersey is one of the bigger calls, but prior to the Six Nations, there was a bit of murmurings that maybe it would be Stafford McDowell in the starting jersey from the get-go because he'd been playing that well for his club. You know, a bunch of broken tackles, tries, setting up tries, clean breaks and whatnot, just been absolutely electric form. So he gets basically reward for that form. So Gregor Townsend said he'd earned that opportunity, which is pleasing. He'll be alongside Hugh Jones, Kyle Steyn, Duan van der Merwe on the wings, and then Blair Kinghorn at fullback. 5 tries for Duhan. He is the top try getter in the Six Nations. But James Lowe's not far behind with 4. Dan Sheehan's got 4. So there is still that up for grabs for one of these sides. Ashman, Sutherland, and Millar-Mills are the forward replacements in the front row. So good to see Rory Sutherland back. He's been absent for a wee while, but Gregor Townsend did say that he's been playing regular rugby over in France now, which is kind of much needed for him. Sam Skinner, Matt Fagerson, 2 forward replacements, and then 3 backs with George Horn, who drops to the bench, Cam Redpath, who drops to the bench, and Kyle Rowe, who retains that bench spot. Stats-wise, Ireland, man, most defenders beaten, most clean breaks. Also the oldest side in the Six Nations, but the second oldest one is the Scots. This maybe speaks to the fact that both these teams retained their coaches from the last Rugby World Cup cycle. Both of these coaches didn't kind of make wholesale changes to their squad. They didn't do a Wales and decide, they need to kind of blood that next generation now. So that stability, I think, is represented in the ages of the squads. Scotland have had the most run meters, the most kick from hand. Both these sides are among the most penalised in the Six Nations. Ireland have had 45, which is number 1, and Scotland has had 44, which is number 2. So that's one area that also could be a deciding factor. But really, in recent times, the Irish have had the Scots number. And, I mean, over the last 5 years, Scotland have had some pretty big games. They've beaten France a handful of times, which not many teams have done in the last kind of 4 years or so. But they can't beat Ireland. Last 5 is 5-0 to Ireland. And only one that's like close. 31-16, 26-5, 22-7, 36-14. None of these games are very close, but there is that one back in 2021, which was at Murrayfield. That was 27-24. That one was genuinely a close one, but the average score is 28-13. So for the most part, Scotland has not been getting us within a score of the Irish. The last Scottish win is 2017, and the last Scottish win in Ireland is 2010. So we're talking a long time ago. But as I said, the Triple Crown is still up for grabs. So Scotland, despite losing last week, still have something to play for in terms of silverware. And the Irish are obviously just looking to do enough to get their hands on that Six Nations. Andy Farrell talked about how hard it is to win a Six Nations and to go back-to-back. Even with the slam gone, it's still going to be a massive achievement, assuming they get their hands on that trophy. There's a lot of permutations, but most of them see Ireland walking away with that trophy. Predictions-wise, the bookies are saying Ireland by 14, and the Rugby Forecast algorithm is saying Ireland by 17. So predicted to get it done pretty easily, but as I said, we'll be looking to see how both these sides bounce back from last week. It is on at the Aviva in Dublin. It's a 4:45 local kickoff, which is 5:45 for me here in NZ. I'll already be up for the previous game with the Welsh taking on the Italians. Matt Carley from England is the ref for this one. But yeah, you guys let us know your thoughts. Do you see the Scots breaking their hoodoo against the Irish? Or are the Irish going to do it in a canter as they have done most of their games recently against the Scots? But yeah, you guys let us know your thoughts and talk to you guys again soon.